Hello everyone, Surat here, and well, it's just me now. Everyone else has decided that they've had enough of the tinfoil hat, or something along that line anyway. I don't know, but I know I'm right about this stuff, and I will prove it. I know I'm right. I'm not the crazy one here. I see these connections. But yeah, from this point on, time constraints mostly in reality are kind of forcing me to do this alone for the rest of the Let's Play. So let's get to it. We've got several more videos to recap here, and several more things to add. Also, yes, you may have noticed I completely reorganized the notepad so I could actually find things now without spending 2-3 minutes per note. It'll still be tough in the middle, but I can zoom in and usually find what I'm looking for. But anyway, we left off at video 68, but that was just me spouting more theory. So we're going to talk about video 69, which is a battle scene, the second area of Shibagaki City. Shibagaki City, the first battle, pretty much once again immediately after the events of the previous battle. It's now 8:22 p.m. on the 27th. On the battlefield, Keitaro, Iori, and Ryoko all start in on comms. Keitaro calls out multiple Daimyo signatures and says that they're getting more of them. Ryoko notes that they're different from the D forces in the database. Iori asks what that means, and Miyuki Inaba pops up to say that they're modified and optimized but similar designs, as the system is making changes to the kaiju on the fly to counteract the pilots. Miyuki then says her processing is at 6% and asks everyone to be careful. Nenji pops up to say he doesn't know how long they have to hold out, but they aren't backing down now, and battle commences. After a while, the battle pauses, and Sekigahara says the database managed to update, and so now we have number 16 to thank for it. Tomi's Sentinel. Yuki chimes in to say the buggy bastards are faster now, and A says any of the buggy bastards getting through means the terminal gets swarmed in seconds. Iori asks if that applies to even the G-molars, and Ryoko says yeah, because it has an upgraded power unit for more destructive potential. A adds that it also has a new alloy in the shell. Nenji says that means they just need to punch harder to make it crack, and battle continues. The Aegis activates at the end of the battle, and Takatoshi jumps on comms to say that everyone needs to check out this metasystem business. Sekigahara asks if Takatoshi had anything to do with the recent addition to the system, and Takatoshi says he's only relaying a message. Nenji asks from who, and Takatoshi says it's from the child version of Chihiro that they talked to a little bit ago. Keitaro is surprised it's her and that she's helping them. Sekigahara hopes he's right. The announcer calls out more signatures approaching, and Ryoko says it means more demos are incoming, but that is all that happens for now there. Let's go ahead. I'm going to put those two down. I don't have to type a whole lot here, thank God. I mean, I do want to type something in. Now we know that there's a meta system. And at some point, we got a Deimos database going on. So let's see, the Daimo, let's see, that should be, yep. Alright, there you are. Chihiro over here is upgrading the meta system. find... No, you're in here. Difficult to spot some. There you are. Tomy was the one that actually managed to update Deimos. Updates on the fly, as a matter of fact. The Deimos database. So now video 70. We are once again in one of the repeating events, so there's no number I can associate with this, but we're back at the Sakura High School girls track and field room. After practice, we see BJ standing on the floor again. Natsuno runs in asking why he's out, and then runs over to her open locker and sees her notebook isn't there. She picked up her PE bag and apologizes to BJ for locking him up due to the Men in Black still being around. She muses about Keitaro having been missing, probably because the Men in Black captured him, and she also muses about Yuki working with the Men in Black. And she remembers she actually took her own notebook to the visual room, or audio-visual room earlier, shoves BJ inside the PE bag, and then runs out to a fade-out. We fade into the outside of that building, where Natsuno sees a Man in Black scanning the area, and manages to leave the scene before he spots her. We fade out again. We fade into Event 106, and now we were in the North Building hallway, and Natsuno emerges from her classroom with a smile. She holds her notebook and swears to protect it better with a strange bit of roleplay as herself, where she kind of gives herself orders to be more careful and agrees to it. BJ pops up to tell her they have to keep moving, and Natsuno says they'll just head towards the gate, but he says no, because he's detected a strange signal headed towards them, but cannot identify it. However, the threat level is really high, and he tells her to leave the area now. She takes a step forward, only to see a very heavily bandaged Tomy quickly walking in her direction. She calls out to Tomy with an "Usami," and BJ tries to shout no as the android pulls out a magic gun of some sort and fires on her, but misses. Natsuno is surprised to no one's surprise, said she was almost hit, and BJ repeats the instruction to run. Natsuno runs down the hallway and we get a fade out. We fade into the inside of the North Building girls' bathroom. Natsuno stops for a second, wondering why Tomy would do that, and BJ corrects her, saying that's an android Tomy instead of the real one. Natsuno extrapolates that evil aliens made a robot to come after BJ. BJ asks where they are now, and Natsuno tells him that they're in the bathroom. He remarks that this is kind of a dead end, so there's nowhere to run, and she quickly says that this is not helping. But BJ says it's kinda too late and dives back in the bag. Natsuno peeks out the door and sees the android is right there, and then runs into an open toilet stall just before the android bursts through the door. Android Tomy walks over to the closed door and starts knocking on it, with the perspective then shifts to show Natsuno cowering on the toilet trying to remain quiet. Outside, the android's asking Natsuno not to make her use force and just come out quietly. Then we hear a new person walk into the bathroom before expressing sarcastic surprise. This perspective shifts to outside the stall again, and we see Erika Iba staring down android Tomy. Tomy asks how Erika found her, and she replies she just thought number 17 was gone, but that signal led her here. And now that Erika has found 426, referring to the consciousness inside Tomy, she can't just walk away. The sheen shifts back to Natsuno, and we hear Erika say that whatever Tomy's planning, Erika won't let her go through with it. 426/Tomy/ whatever you want to call her asks Erika if she knew Ida was full of crap, so why does Erika still have something against her? 426. Erika says that many people fell victim to 426, so she has to destroy him here and now. 426 says Erika's awfully dramatic for a machine, and she replies she's awfully strong too. We hear a crunch, and 426 remarks that his body is falling apart, and he can barely hold his gun straight. Another crunch, followed by several more, as 426 says he didn't think he'd ever see her resort to violence, knowing who she was. He continues that even her heart is just a machine now, and she's a monster, no different than him. He follows that only makes this easier before an odd metal slicing metal sound is heard and the fighting stops. Natsuno sits on the toilet, horrified, and asks what happened because it's suddenly gotten really quiet. She emerges from the stall to see a destroyed bathroom with Erika standing near the window as electricity kinda arcs around her head. Also of note, they've got a bay window in this bathroom. That's kinda creepy. Just saying. Natsuno is forced to approach the android, and a very broken android Tomy body is seen on the ground in a kneeling position. Natsuno tentatively tries to walk toward android Tamao and seems confused at the moment. Tamao walks over to the center of the room, trying to orient herself as Natsuno examines the broken Tomy, remarking that it really is a robot that looks just like Tomy. Natsuno walks towards android Tamao, asking if she really did this, when BJ pops out of the bag, telling her to stay back. Natsuno chides him for jumping out, and he replies that Tamao is also an android, created in Tamao's image, and Natsuno is surprised she's a robot as well. BJ had called her there himself, but as of a few moments ago, he can't identify her, which signifies that 426 is taking control of that android body. 426 looks down at BJ, says he didn't expect Miura to be there as well. BJ confirms that 426 switched bodies into android Tamao and attempts to tell Natsuno to run again as 426 switches off his power. 426 runs over to the broken android as Natsuno talks to BJ, trying to wake him up. 426 tells her not to worry as he's not broken, he's just powered down for the moment, and he grabs the magical gun from the broken Tomy's body. Natsuno asks why 426 came for BJ, and 426 says there's a slight misunderstanding as he came there for Natsuno. He says the monsters that destroy the city have a new commander, and it's her. He says that starting now, he'll be giving her orders and shoots her in the cheek with the magical gun. Natsuno collapses to her knees and the scene fades to black. I mean, I'm not really sure at this point. I don't know what the hell the game is going to call this freaking gun, but it's some type of injector, but they're busy playing up the whole magical girl thing. Well, anyway, the scene fades in again with BJ calling out to Natsuno, who wakes up in the same position. She hops up to her feet, looking around the room and wondering what the hell just happened. BJ replies he's not sure, and she recalls she came to get the notebook, kind of remembered seeing Tomy, but everything else is wiped out of her memory. BJ prods her to leave before anyone else shows up, and she agrees. She shoves BJ in the bag, goes to leave, and wonder why her cheek stings before leaving the room. We fade to black and get to be continued. So, we're gonna need one of you. I need two of you and one more of you. Okay. Let's see, we need a card for the Android version of Tamao Karabe here. I think a lot of these are going to be well, I know a lot of these are going to be superfluous. We're going to need another card. One specifically for 426 sitting in Android Tomy's body. And then we need another card here for Android or 426 in Android Tamao's body. Those are two separate things here. And then one last card for AI Keitaro Miura. Some of you are going to laugh at this. Some of you won't. Some of you are going to wonder why I think people will laugh at this. And that is okay to not know. And 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so Oh, cut that out. Come on. Not gonna let me do that? Nope, not gonna let me do that, are you? Damn. It used to let me copy those things. Oh well. So let's see. First of all, we need to go... 31 is right here. So we have 426 and Tomi's body there was carrying the signal of Sentinel 17. And we have, let's see, 173 should be out here somewhere. There it is. 426. Big old number 426 right there. Let's see. Took control of... I know it's number 109. Android Tomi Kisaragi. Let's see then... the Mao android and the 426 in Tomi's body. Those two fought and destroyed the bathroom. 426 here. Managed to power down. I know you're around here somewhere. Let's see. Yeah, there you are. Power down BJ. And here. You managed to shoot. I almost had it right dead on. Ooh, Natsuno there. Managed to shoot Natsuno. Find 14, we can continue on here. Hey, Keitaro. You were given affinity with 17. And let's see, 426. Is not exactly the biggest fan of adult Tetsuya Ida here. And then let's see. Put that over there. It's 38. It's connected to AI Keitaro Miura for the very obvious reason that Keitaro Miura is BJ's consciousness. Actually got what should be a bombshell right there. Now that we actually have confirmation of exactly who BJ has been this whole time. Oh well, we move on to video 71. We return to Natsuno walking to the back of the track and field room. 426, in Android Tamao's body, stands in front of a box-formed BJ in the middle of the room. Natsuno muses about the scar on her cheek and wonders if she was captured and had memories erased or if she was just injected with something. Natsuno, thinking the android is real Tamao, asks how Tamao actually got there. 426 replies that the room isn't ideal as he'd be found a little too soon. Natsuno thinks maybe Tamao was abducted by a UFO and that's how she got there. Shortly after, the track team manager walks in, sees the android and asks whose it is, and if she wants to join the team. The manager assumes she turned in her sign-up form but never showed up and mistakes a Tamao android for a student named Erika Iba. 426 decides to roll with it and potentially hopes to hide using the name. The manager confirms Erika's in Class 1B next to Natsuno in Class 1C. The manager then asks if Erika is over her illness and she replies not entirely, so she can't join yet. Manager says it's too bad and hopes she gets well soon, and Natsuno muses that maybe Erica just looks like Tamal, and wonders if someone like that was really just next door. 426 tests out the sound of the name and leaves the room. The manager calls her weird and Natsuno agrees, and the manager leaves to tell the coach this news, and BJ decides to wake up. Natsuno asks if she did anything to him, and he replies that no one was there. He starts in again with the desire to go to the gate, and Natsuno says she needs to finish practice first, but he insists. She sighs, picks up her PE bag, shoves BJ in it, and leaves the room. To a fade out. We fade in to see outside the athletics building, where a track member sees her and asks if she's going home. Natsuno asks her not to tell the captain, as the planet's in danger. The member shrugs and Natsuno leaves. Fade out. Fade in to the pair arriving at the Tokisaka Shrine. Natsuno takes BJ out of the bag and BJ starts scanning sectors. Natsuno and BJ go over the options to search in sectors 1, 2, and 5. 1 has no Sentinel found, 5 could be traveled to, but no signal from 17 was detected. And Sector 2 was the first destination they reached, but they really didn't get to look around too much then, so they head to Sector 2 again. We get that clock speeding around graphic, and we fade to black. We finally reach a numbered event in Event 165. The pair makes it back to the ruined street in the destroyed city in 2065. Natsuno says they don't see any tripods, but they can't let their guard down. She asks just how they're going to do anything, and BJ assumes flying mode and tells her the streets are still on fire and not safe, so it will take him about 27 minutes to search the path before he flies off. She decides that she's not going to waste a time travel opportunity walking around, and goes around to walk around the ruined street to a fade out. So, that was video 71. Let's see. Android 426 takes on Erica Iba's identity. We actually got to see that. Video 72. We fade in to see Natsuno running along the same street. She comes along and trusts a giant robot and wonders if that might actually be a Sentinel. She makes a smug statement about finding one first, and that's what you get for leaving her behind, only for her to quickly see a very shattered BJ drone unit on the street nearby. She assumes that this is the BJ she knows and asks what exactly happened to him. She begs the unit to talk to her, and the scene fades out for a second. Fade back into Natsuno standing nearby and asking what happened. She recalls the fact that he had a brain and thinks that if she can save his brain, she can save him, and begins to dig around in the robot's body. She pulls out what looks like a little vacuum tube with a small brain in it and wonders if that's the brain. And then after she examines the whole thing, she sees that the brain and the robot were built by Shikishima. Natsuno has a moment of calling herself an idiot for believing BJ was an alien when he was just a robot made in Japan the entire time. At that point, BJ flies in, lands, and tells Natsuno he's been looking for her. Natsuno expresses surprise at seeing BJ functional, and then realizes she pulled the brain out of a completely different robot. BJ turns to see the Sentinel and says she found Sentinel number 8, a remote control type, but it is not the number 17 he is looking for. She pulls out the other brain and asks/tells him that he's not an alien, and he's just a robot made in Japan. She then looks at the Sentinel, realizes that it was most likely made by Shikishima, and comes to the further realization that the tripods must have been too. BJ confirms the tripods are four-legged autonomous cranes from Shikishima, calling it the High Quad 150B, a heavy machinery robot that was meant to develop Mars. Natsuno asks why robots meant for Mars were invading Earth, and BJ replies then that they are not actually on Earth, and states that he's only speculating because the lack of proof makes it only a possibility, and the basis for this speculation is a log. BJ begins BJ begins the playback, and we see future Ninji and future Natsuno in communication with each other. Ninji tells her to go on, and she says there are 117 planets under consideration for the project, with the top prospect being a planetary system 12 light years away. Ninji tells her that he doesn't think it's going to work, and asks if she's the professor's daughter. She replies she is, and that she's helping with the layout. He asks if she means the migration ship, as it's kinda small. She says it's not possible to sustain life for extended periods in space, and the ship will be carrying just their DNA, and they'll restart humanity during the final phase of the project. He tells her that they're then creating aliens, and asks how large a population is she estimating. She says 6 million, and Ninji asks if she actually expects him to approve the project. She tells him he'd understand if he'd listened to her mother's explanation, and he cuts her off, telling her it's not necessary because the endeavor is nothing but self-satisfying and impractical. He says he's in charge now since his father passed away, and the research will be disposed of and the funds suspended. She begs him to reconsider, and the log ends. BJ says it was recorded with Natsuno Manami's ID in 2188, and after that log, the plan was implemented. Natsuno muses about 2188 being in the future, and BJ says they're further into the future than when the log took place. BJ asks Natsuno if she understands that it's possible that she's the alien they created. She gasps as the scene fades to black with "to be continued," marking the end of that chapter. So, I'm going to go ahead and 100, 1, 2. I need a green one for 202. 3, 204, 205. We got a decent amount of cards out of this one. Let's see, Sentinel number 8 gets an entry. An official name of one of the kaiju. The High Quad 150B gets its own little thing here. Mars Development gets a note here. The word speculation, that's going to get its own little note here. And the scraping sound you may or may not be hearing is a cat in a cardboard box on the desk over here. The next block will be Ninji Ogata of the future. Or as maybe speculated, the past. I could have sworn this was already a card at some point in time, but I didn't see it when I was making this list. So now we have a card for DNA. We have a card talking about the planetary system that we found 12 light years away. And then we're going to have one last card. So I counted correctly. Talking about research and funding. Well, let's see. So let's see, what did we learn today? Well, we learned that Shikishima here managed to build BJ. Natsuno here found Sentinel number 8 sitting in 2065. And through extrapolation, down here is adult Tetsuya Ida. And based on what we know in the Battle of 2064, we know that he was the one responsible for operating Autonomous Number 8 in 2064. There's the card for the Daimos. There's the High Quad Walker over here. Turns out to be yet another Shikishima Kaiju type. And let's see, the Mars development was a previous attempt of the Interstellar Development Project of 2188, right here. Let's see. Then Ninja Ogata from the future runs Shikishima after his father. Let's see, and the funding over here, the research and funding. That's awfully close up here, yep. The funding is very much needed by that Interstellar Development Project. Which, as we just heard, Jackass over here decided to try to deny that funding. In the process of trying to deny the funding was an attempt to try to stop the Interstellar Development Project. Interstellar. What the hell did I just say? Interstellar Development Project. Also, Cat is rattling around plastic bags, just in case you're hearing that. Okay, now back to the videos. Video 73. We are back to Juro, and we begin with Juro in the usual classroom. Kyuta runs up to him about the same problem of not being able to find Shu. Juro grabs a stack of papers waiting for him and tells Kyuta he has to go take him to the nurse's office, and the usual dialogue happens to meet between the two of them. Fade out as Juro leaves the classroom. He runs off the corridor to another fade out, and then we fade in to Juro walking into the office where we see Ryoko laying on one of the beds. Juro walks over to the desk and drops all those surveys, as he calls them, off. Then looks at Ryoko and wonders if she collapsed again and muses that he should probably just let her rest. However, Ryoko wakes up and gets out of bed, sees Juro, and calls him Izumi. She says she's glad he's safe because she heard terrible things and she thought that she doesn't finish in the moment. Juro asks to stop making fun of him, as that's not actually his name. She asks who he is if he's not Izumi, and he replies that he's Kurabe, and they talked about this the other day. She's confused and he asks how her injuries are, as he heard she was in a really bad car accident, and then tells her to take it easy. Juro turns to leave, and as he reaches the door, Kyuta bursts in, surprised he's still there. He says he couldn't find Shu anywhere, so they might as well call it a day and go home. Ryoko starts showing signs of a headache, and Juro asks if she's alright, and she says no, but neither is he. Juro stops to think, and he recalls seeing Kyuta in a dream involving an android. Nothing further happens as Juro and Kyuta leave the office. This cuts to a very fast earned to be continued. The video still continued, however, because that didn't take very long, to once again Juro being in the classroom. All plays out exactly the same way, and Juro heads the hallway. In the hallway, Juro runs into Megami in the hall, and she asks if he'll be home for dinner, as she plans to cook something for him. He reminds her that they're still at school, so she needs to watch what they're saying. She continues saying she's thinking Hamburg steak for dinner, and Jiro reminds her that they could be expelled if people found out, to which she replies she doesn't mind. He quickly replies that he does. She says it's their secret, so she will be more discreet. She walks off to the left side of the screen, and Jiro thinks it feels awkward going home like that, and he's going to be restless as they're just teenagers and can't be living together yet, so what is she thinking, showing up at his place and treating him like that? He thinks back to the day she moved in to a fade out. We fade in to actually get a numbered event here, a flashback to event 105, as Jiro walks into his house and felt it was kind of strange that the door was unlocked and hoped there wasn't a break-in. He walks further in the house when Megami walks into the room with him, and he asks if she's from his school because he thinks they're in the same grade, and she interrupts him by just glomping onto him and causing him to drop his bag. She tells him it's been 40 years and she's missed his touch. He pushes her off and tells her to hold on and back up. He asks what she's doing in his house, and she says she'll be renting a room starting today, and introduces herself. He asks if she's joking, and she pulls out the rental agreement, saying that she spoke with Tamao, his landlord. He asks, "My grandma?" And she replies she's already moved in her furniture. She says that there was an empty room Tamao was planning to rent out, but he didn't expect it to be a girl from school. He wonders just exactly what his grandma was thinking, as he says he can't do this. He says Tamao is going to be out the whole month visiting relatives in Shimane, so it'd just be the two of them there, so if the school found out, they'd probably be expelled. She replies that wouldn't be so bad, and says she's going to get started on dinner because as a thank you for letting her stay there, she's going to be cooking his meals. She exits to the kitchen, and Jiro follows to a fade out. We fade back into the hallway where Nurse Chihiro gets a deep in thought Jiro's attention by calling his name. Startled, he spins around and she asks why he seems deeply concerned. She asks if he's feeling ill, and he says that's not it. He muses about how Megami always stands a little too close and he doesn't know how to interact with her because it makes him self-conscious. He holds out the stack of papers and tells her she forgot them again. She apologizes and thanks him before walking off. He realizes that saves him a trip, so he decides to go meet Kyuta at the front gate. Fade out. Event 200 now. En route to the front gate, Jiro stops at the stairwell, seeing Rinya and Megami talking. Come on, thank you. My notepad decided to do weird things there. She asks what he plans to do, and as she's gotten permission from Morimura. Rinya says, "I see," but says it isn't looking good as there's an issue with Jiro's condition, and they can't let it continue as is. She asks if they still plan on using him, and says they can't because she won't let them, and begs for them to let him be free of the Sentinel. Rinya says Jiro's the only one who can fight, so he can't promise anything. He does recognize that she harbors feelings for him, but tells her that she needs to understand that Jiro is no longer the Izumi she knew, and he's now Jiro Kurabe. Jiro perks up at hearing this, and Rinya continues that she'd do well to consider him a different person entirely. The new personality is not stable, so she shouldn't disregard the danger it may put her in. She says he will recover, and she'll make sure of it. He continues to say that even if they erase the Jiro Kurabe personality, it'd still be a futile effort, as he'd already explained, as Izumi's memory is gone and there's nothing left. Jiro finally continues down the stairs, and Rinya asks how long he was listening. Rinya goes silent, walks up the stairs and out of the scene. Jiro asks what that was about, and Megami remains silent. He asks who Izumi is, and she can only respond saying that she'll cook one of his favorite meals, and asks that he come straight home and no eating out before running off screen. Jiro stands on the stairs, confused that he may be a different person called Jiro Izumi. He thinks it sounds ridiculous, but has a sinking feeling like the one Megami cares about isn't really him. And we fade out, to be continued. So let's see. The first one's easy. Megami is just kind of buried down here. Can I There we go. Megumi's kind of buried there. There you are, Tamao. Hi, Tamao. As Tamao rents out a room to Megumi. Sorry, had to pause the video real quick and then I decided to recenter it. So that's going to be a stark jump for you guys, isn't it? Anyway, video 74. Once again, Jiro's in the classroom and we move on the hallway, which is boring, so we move on to the nurse's office. Jiro walks in and drops the papers on the desk, same as before. Ryoko still on the bed. This time, Jiro notices the documents on Izumi he saw before are missing. He then looks at Ryoko when she wakes up, stands, calls him Izumi as before, and she says she's glad he's safe. He responds by simply telling her his name is Kurabe, and she says, "That's right," and holds her head. He asks if she knew Izumi too, and says that Jiro Izumi is him, but he's been given a different personality. He asks by who, and she starts by saying both of them lost their memories after a certain incident, and suffered serious mental trauma. She continues to say, especially him, as she heard he had it worst of all, but she's not doing too well either, as her memories keep disappearing to the point she isn't sure if she'll remember this conversation. He asks what the incident was, and she tells him it happened in the future, that he received medical treatment here. He's in disbelief, but she insists that he is Jiro Izumi. He says this is crazy and really hard to believe, and she doesn't blame him. Jiro steps back to think and recaps Izumi is in the future, lost his memories, and it was so bad he needed a new personality, and that's how he became Kurabe. It's hard to believe, but if it's true, it would explain all about the off feeling he'd been getting. He also tried to talk to Megumi about the talk he saw on the stairs, but she dodged the question with a sad look on her face. He then thinks about seeing Kyuta in a creepy dream about an asteroid. He then recalls the dream where he shot people and realizes the implications of it, and finally decides to walk out of the office. But as he opens the door to leave, Kyuta rushes in, saying he couldn't find Shu anywhere. Again, she tells him he isn't alright when he asks if she is, and Jiro leaves the office with Kyuta in tow. Then we get sad because Jiro is now locked off until we get 2 more characters 30% of their story done. So now we go off to Tomi's story and the room in Keiakicho that is 2025 right now. Tomi walks in from off screen and Miwako greets her. She asks if Senpai, and by Senpai meaning Ryoko, woke up, and Miwako shakes her head no. Ninji walks in from off screen declaring he's back, and Tomi thinks to herself that Shikishima had plans in the future to colonize planets, and the Kaiju were basically tools for terraforming, so why are they there in the past? She wonders if Morimura and Megumi were planning to fight those things. She breaks her inner dialogue to tell Miwako they found that the Kaiju weren't monsters or aliens at all, and Ninji interrupts, saying they're just heavy machinery made by Shikishima. Miwako asks if they mean like construction vehicles, and is surprised they were attacked by something like that. Ninji says they're from some interstellar development project even further in the future, and Tomi says they were supposed to do work on another planet but has no idea why they went back in time or why they went berserk. Miwako asks what else they can find. Ninji stands up and offers Tomi and Miwako some chocolate bars he found at a convenience store. Tomi realizes she needs a sugar rush, and both of them eat the chocolate. Tomi decides she needs to go see her house and tells him to wait a bit before she runs off in that direction. Ninji tells Miwako to stay with Ryoko and chases after Tomi to a fade out. We fade in to see Tomi standing in front of the ruined apartment, in front of her ruined apartment specifically, as Ninji runs into frame. She's kind of in shock at seeing a ruined apartment and apologizes for not having to get that out, saying she knows she needs to be strong. Ninji tells her it's okay not to push herself, and if she needs to cry, then she should. She says she's not crying, and he asks that if she's not, what's with the voice, because it sure sounds like she has a cold. She She replies she always sounds like this, and he basically says, "Oh, whatever, man." She reminisces about the cake shop that had the pear tart that she and Megami used to love getting. Neji asks if that's one of her friends, and she replies yes, then realizes that Megami saw what was happening there, and that why she did something that forced Tomi to recall 1985 in a fade to black. Tomi walks on screen in event 46. We're jumping back some. Tomi walks on screen to the 1985 schoolyard brick path and wonders why Rinya would do something to her and make her go to class and pretend everything is normal, which is impossible for her because everything's like 40 years old right now. Tomi looks at some girls on a bench and muses that they look her age, but would be in their 50s back home. Iori runs in from off screen and apologizes to Miwako for being late. Miwako asks where she was, and she replies that she took a nap on a free bed in the nurse's office. Miwako asks in surprise that she skipped 6th period for that, and Iori says she didn't mean to, but she did, as class was over when she woke up. The pair walks off screen, and Tomi follows, saying it must be nice to take naps in the nurse's office, but now it's time to hit the library to try to dig up dirt on Shikishima, and the lack of smartphones feels like suffering. Megami walks by and Tomi stops her, glad to see she's okay, but is still surprised to see her there. Tomi asks what happened to the city, as Megami was there and actually stayed back. Tomi asks if her mom and dad are fine, as she still doesn't believe what Rinya has been telling her, and all that has to be a lie. Juro walks by for, well, with whatever reason, without saying a word, and Tomi asks Megami if that's Izumi, and he's in her class, so she's seen him around, but when she talks to him, he's a totally different person, as he's all nervous and it's just kind of weird. Megami just kind of grunts in response before telling her that as a result of battle he lost all his memories. Tomi guesses in surprise and asks if she means he hit his head so it'll all come back to him. Megami says the loss is permanent, and Tomi realizes he's a completely different person now, so he probably doesn't remember Megami. She asks Megami if they're supposed to give up on him, and Megami finally shows some reaction, shouting that she could never give up on him, and Tomi apologizes as the scene fades out with a "to be continued." So, Megami, we learned, stay behind. Where the hell are you, card? There you are. Stay behind in Sector 3 a little extra time. Fair enough. Now we move on to video 75. We are up to event 266, so we've kind of jumped forward in the story, and to be there, we are now in a Sekigahara's story again. He and Iori are walking around on the brick path in the schoolyard. He asks if she's sure the MIBs aren't hanging around, and she replies that she's positive. She saw them this morning, but not this afternoon. She asks if he thinks they've left, and he replies that he hopes so. He muses about Operation Aegis and how it's Chihiro's major objective succeeding, meaning that he won't be able to leave the world, and that must be why he killed her. He muses that Iori confessed feelings for him, but he has yet to give her an answer. He asks if it'll be a problem if a stranger like him is seen on campus. She doesn't seem to know, but says he shouldn't worry with his uniform, as it's still a Sakura uniform, even if it is a different era. She then asks what Sakura High is like in the future, and he tells her that there should be a new building up and running, and when she asks for clarification, he says she'll see it for herself someday, which she says isn't fair. He asks if just anyone could get into the nurse's office, and she says that with no teacher it's closed, but she'll figure something out. Tomi walks up and starts to talk to Iori and is surprised to see A, and asks what he's doing there. Iori says he wanted to check out the school, so she's showing him around. Tomi stutters out an "oh, cool," and Iori says they need to get going. Tomi takes her leave and walks away, only to turn back with a disapproving look before exiting. Iori and A walk up to the doors of the school building, and we see Shu and Yuki leaving school. A takes note that Yuki was the one that gave him the box earlier. A and Iori walk into the school to a fade out. We move on to event 267 over here, and we fade into the pair entering the nurse's office. Iori says she got the key to the office and all she had to do was lie to a teacher about a friend skinning their knee. Iori blushes and says that it's now just the two of them all alone in the office. A tries to check the desk, but the drawers are locked, so he searches the desktop and finds more medicine like the bottle he was holding. Iori asks him what he's looking for, as it must be important, and then offers to run to the teacher's lounge to find a copy of the key to the desk before running off to do so. He then takes a look at some student medical records, finds Ryoko's there, who was also given the pills, and makes a connection that Chihiro has been giving the drugs to the students Ryoko, Shu, and Jiro Izumi. Megami enters the office, and as he's telling her it's closed, she pulls out the magic gun and aims it at him, making him respond by pulling his phaser, telling her she'd better start talking, and asks if she's working with the men that are after him. She tells him it's what he wanted her to do, and he questions that. Tomi runs in, tells A to wait, and she gets in between the two of them and tells them both to stop. Megami runs off. Tomi asks her what she was thinking. Then Tomi turns to A and says she only followed out of curiosity, then asks what just happened with Megami. She asks where Iori is and why he's by himself, and he asks what her problem is, to which she replies that she's obviously just a hopeless busybody before running off to look for Megami. That was kind of a confusing scene to even watch, much less explain. He struggles to recall the time he saw Tomi, and the scene itself fades out. Let's see. So let's see, now that we know Shu is taking some medicine. Yep. Shu was taking some medicine. And now we move on to video 76. We fade in to see A run into the Shikishima No. 6 lab. He remarks it may not be abandoned and looks at the terminal in hopes he can tell him where he is. He finds android information and research data first and realizes he's in that lab in 2104, meaning he's 40 years in the future. He sees the skeleton of an android and wonders if that's what the lab is for. Then a headache occurs and he remarks he's been getting them lately. One of the android skeletons in front of them stands, so he retreats, and another android walks in the door, cutting him off. The androids advance on him until android Tomi shows up and shoots them, telling A that unless he wants to die, he needs to stop snooping around. He tells him the surface is covered in lethal amounts of radiation, so going topside means you cough up blood until you die. He asks who she is, and she replies that she's just a hopeless busybody. She says she inspected the Sentinel that transmitted underground, and asks him how much he understands about the current situation. He says he doesn't know why, but he ended up here and he has no idea what happened. Tomi offers to explain by starting at the end. She tells him the Sentinel and he are both compromised by code DD426. He asks what that is, but she replies it's a program that's been implemented into him, specifically the nanomachines in his body. It primarily severs a function of the of the nanomachine, specifically the part that's physically connected to the brain, specifically a part of the brain that stores memories. This causes brain damage via memory loss and potentially could leave you a husk. He asks if that's the reason for the headaches since he's had ever since he's got there. Then he asks why anyone would want to do this and if it's possible to delete the code. She says it's not possible as access to his nanomachines is restricted, so once a code or program is implemented, there's no way to delete it. He asks how long until he becomes a husk, and she says it depends how intense the infection is or how long you spend in the infected sentinel. If you assume the infection is moving slowly, it'll take about a month to spread to the entire body, but that's best case scenario, and worst case is a few days. She says she may not be able to remove it, but she can delay the effects, as luckily, she found a nanomachine lab here after analyzing the underground mainframe's data, since this is a facility that researches future tech. She says she can create a code that will temporarily stall the effects, but first she wants to make a deal, as she needs a favor. She needs him to get her out of there, as only people with nanomachines can actually use the shifter. He asks what a young girl like her is doing in a place like that, then spots the exposed skeleton on her leg and understands. Excuse me. He says the androids are wrapped in human-like skin, and she replies it's easy to see the damage on the skin, so the cat's kinda out of the bag about her being an android. A recalled that Okino said some AI stole pills for his condition. No, AI said that an AI stole an android and escaped. I skipped a line there. She tells A he should ask Okino about DD426, as no one knows more about it than he does. She asks how the offer sounds, and he says he doesn't have a choice. She gets him some pills for his condition, as she didn't want him to forget about the deal, and we fade to black, to be continued. Okay, so down here we got one more card for this section and a bunch of strings to put up. Memory loss and headaches via brain damage. But that's her new card. Oh wait, we have two new cards. We have two new cards. That's not a card we've already had on the board. For some reason, I thought it was. And for some reason, I just didn't see it on the list. There you go. DD426. So now, let's see. We've got a few people that have been infected. There for a second while I find the first of the lot here. There you are. You know, you were infected. Come on, thank you. And there you are, Izumi. We know you were infected by DD426. There. Definitely a little hard to read these things down here. There you are, Ryoko. We know you were affected by it too. Let's see. 426. The name of the Sentinel infection that we have all heard so much about by now. Here, these pills that people have been taking are some type of counter agent for it. Pills created. Where are you? At least some of the pills were created by Android Tomi Kisaragi right there. Say that the effects of 426 memory loss and headaches via brain damage. We learned a semi-interesting fact here. Dimensional shift, along with a few other things. That requires nanomachines to actually operate. And then, as we've just heard, Mikasa Okino is apparently an expert in DD-426 for some strange reason. Then A here is going to help there you are. A helps Tomoe and the android Tomi Kisaragi get out of the lab. And then we learned that Tomi's point of creation was indeed the 6th biggest lab, Shikishima. A handful of cards left. Okay. For this video, not just this thing here, not just the next recap, but for the rest of the video, a handful. Moving on to video 77, we begin with Juro in the classroom again. Now that we've unlocked the prerequisites to get here, only something is slightly different. And that it starts with Kyuta walking up to Juro from the other side of the screen and saying he just wants to go home. And then he goes back to read his manga, but instead of having gathered near the back window, Miwako and Tomi are getting ready to go home themselves, and there are no papers to gather on the podium. For the first time in a long time, we've had significant progress and gotten a new scene here. Juro walks up to Kyuta, and I've got a yawn. Walks up to Kyuta and asks if he just wants to go to Shu's place, as he didn't bring it up today for once. Kyuta says he beat the game, so now the two of them can hang out, and asks Juro where he wants to go. Juro wonders if that one video that's been brought up a few times is available for rent. Kyuta says probably, and asks if Juro wants to go check. To be meta about it, the player makes a selection to go to the store. Juro doesn't react, but Kyuta says, okay, cool, reminds Juro to get his bag, and gets ready to go to the video store. Juro, still wordless, gathers up his bag. Kyuta says he hopes no one's checked out the video yet, and the pair leave the classroom with a fade to black. Event 236 happens, and we fade into the Kyakicho shopping district as the pair of them is heading home. Kyuta says they're out of luck as the video store is closed. Yes, closed being a word for it. Juro adds that it looks like it won't be reopening anytime soon as all the windows were just absolutely shattered. Kyuta blames the gas explosion, and Juro says he saw it on TV, but he didn't realize it was their video store. Juro recalls seeing a news report about a gas leak in the shopping district that exploded buildings and shattered windows on the 7 a.m. news. Kyuta asks if they should just go home disappointed, and Juro replies they don't have much of a choice. Kitaro walks onto the screen, seemingly running into Kyuta and not acknowledging it. Kyuta just kind of walks to the other side of Juro, and Juro asks what Kitaro's doing there, and he replies that he followed you after school. Juro asks if something's wrong, and Kitaro asks for the truth, as he doesn't need to play innocent. Kitaro says Juro's a Sentinel pilot and wants to know how he activated the Sentinel. Juro then asks what a Sentinel is, and Kitaro asks if this means he's forgotten, as it just happened the other day, right there. Juro asks if he means the gas explosion, and Kitaro says there wasn't a gas explosion, as that was where Jiro transmitted a Sentinel. Jiro acts confused at the word transmitted. Kyuta steps forward, asks if he's talking about movies, as he thinks he saw that one. Jiro replies that it did happen and one of the tapes Kyuta let him borrow. Keitaro turns around and asks Jiro who he's talking to. Jiro tells Keitaro that it's one of his classmates, Kyuta Shiba. Keitaro asks where he is. Jiro gets confused and says Kyuta's like right next to them. Keitaro apologizes and says it's just he and Jiro there. Jiro starts to tell Keitaro to stop joking, but starts to remember other times something like this has happened, and we fade to black. Previously in the classroom, Kyuta asks him if he checked out the video he linked to Jiro, and he replies he watched the whole thing but forgot to bring it back. At Jiro's words, Tomi spins around to listen, and Kyuta says it's no problem and tells Jiro he has to let him know what he thought about it. Jiro replies that the criminal ended up taking over the main guy's body, so the main guy became a criminal, and he doesn't know how to feel about it since it's kinda controversial, and Kyuta says the ending is awesome. Tomi walks up and asks Jiro why he keeps talking to himself, as Kyuta walks off to the side and looks like he's out of the Feel Good Inc. videos. Tomi asks if he's okay, and he tells her he was talking to Kyuta, and she asks who that is. He tells her the full name, but she says there's no one here by that name in the class. He walks up to Miwako, and she acts like she's about to remind him of the papers on the podium, and he interrupts her to tell her he'll get them later. He tells her Tomi's acting strange and saying there's no one named Kyuta in the class. Miwako doesn't recognize the name, and when he says Kyuta's standing right there, Miwako tells him no one's there. She asks if he's okay, and he asks Kyuta to say something. Tomi asks if this is a prank or if he's talking to ghosts, and either way it's not funny. Kyuta retorts about being called a ghost, saying the girls need a better sense of humor, and tells him, let's go. Kyuta walks over to the door and tells him to get a move on already, and Jiro nervously asks him if they actually grew up together. Kyuta replies they've been best buds ever since grade school and wonders what's gotten into Jiro. Jiro replies something isn't right, and then muses that he can't remember any times in grade school or middle school with Kyuta in them. He tells Kyuta he can't remember any details of being together in previous years, and has no memories of their time together. Kyuta says he should have known Jiro would figure it out, as he probably overdid it with the mind hacking lately. Jiro suffers a headache, and Kyuta offers him a tape, telling him not to overthink this and just take the tape with him. The tape is Jiro's next set of memories, so he tells him watch it carefully. Jiro says okay, and the screen fades to white. We fade in to event 237, back to Jiro at the shopping district with Keitaro chasing him, asking him to wait. Jiro says he remembers now that Kyuta is, but Kyuta appears out of thin air to interrupt him. Jiro says he's the only one that can see him, and Kyuta replies he can't let anyone else in on the secret. He says he needs to get his shit together because he blows his cover when he's not careful. Jiro asks who he is, and Kyuta replies with Artificial Personality 48Q, codename QTA-CBA. In other words, Kyuta Shiba. Kyuta calls upon a stretch, but he had to come up with something that suited Jiro. He seems to get along with it, as Jiro seems to get along well with the type of guy Kyuta is. And it's kinda too late to run, as he already filled Jiro's head with transplanted memories that are running around there. But if he just leaves everything to Kyuta, everything will be just fine. Jiro questions the transplanted memories, and Kyuta says they're his. Kyuta says he's been better off not knowing, and says it's kind of a shame. Jiro slowly realizes the movies were Kyuta's memories, and Kyuta corrects him that his real name is Jiro Izumi, and those are Izumi's memories. Kyuta tells him that he won't remember this anyway, so he needs to chill to avoid looking crazy. Kyuta pulls out a tape and tells Jiro he has a new video for him, and needs to forget about the world for a bit, so he should just watch the tape to wipe his mind clean as a whistle. Jiro tells him to stop, and Kyuda disappears with only the floating tape left behind, and Kitaro braces himself while calling out Jiro's name. Fade to black to a to be continued. I've been reversing the order of these. It doesn't matter anymore, I don't think. I reversed the order of the cards. I'll fix it later. I'll remember to fix it later. Yellow is supposed to be the important people here. Like the one I'm about to put up. Of course, I've actually got to copy the entire thing here. I will fix that in just a second. Let me get these sorted, and I'll pause the video and fix the coloring. That it's been a little while since I recorded one of these videos. I think that's the only one. Let's see. Yeah, I would normally have to update the string between those two to say Kyuta only exists inside Jiro's mind. But now, let me bring Kyuta to the front here, because he gets both the strings that I have left over here. Kyuta. His other name is Artificial Personality 48Q. And he's also a alternate identity, alternate form for Jiro Izumi. And about this point in the Let's Play, we're actually getting some bombs. Hey, give me just 1 second. I am going to fix my color palette here. Just 1 second. Okay. All that should be good now. So here we go, video 78, the next to last video in this update here. We're going to stick around with Jiro for the time being, and he's still in Class 1B, which starts the same way as the last cycle, only Jiro remembers the truth about Kyuta and is kind of mad at him. Specifically that he remembers that Kyuta's not actually human, has been altering his memories, and is trying to turn him back into Izumi. And then recaps what he knows about Izumi and how Kurabe came about. He considers the VHS a visitor from another world and how it's a memory of Izumi and Chihiro escaping the UFO to Sumire Bridge. He then overhears Miwako ask Tomi if she's meeting up at the same place again, and Tomi pretty much says exactly that as she runs out the door. Miwako says it's about that time, and she leaves as well. Jiro walks up to Kyuta with an angry look on his face, and Kyuta asks him if he had another nightmare or something. He tells Kyuta to stop, as he knows he's the only one that can see him. Kyuta muses about Jiro's memory not being fully wiped and resigns himself to mind hacking having its limits. Jiro demands to know why Kyuta gave him the memories and asks if he's trying to turn him back to Izumi. Jiro says not to worry about it, as he was never meant to be that way in the first place. Jiro asks what he is, and he gets the same 48Q, Kyuta Shiba, and artificial personality answer. Jiro says that but doesn't mean anything to him, and Kyuta tells him to just watch a video and relax. Jiro refuses, and Kyuta says they can't have him causing a scene here, so they need to wipe his memory again, and Kyuta begins the attempt. Jiro runs, grabs his bag, and heads for the exit, and we fade to black. We fade in to see Jiro running into Ninji just outside his classroom door. Ninji tells him to watch it. Ninji looks in the classroom and says, she's not here. Jiro asks him if he's looking for someone, and Ninja replies he's looking for Tomi. He asks Jiro where she went, but immediately realizes he doesn't expect Jiro to know before walking off. Jiro realizes running won't change anything, and tries to think who might actually help. Iori is absent, so maybe Megumi. He considers for a moment and remembers Ryoko knows Izumi for sure, and heads to the nurse's office to try to find her to a fade to black. Event 239 finally happens, and we fade into Jiro running late into the office with Ryoko still laying on a bed. He asks her to wake up, and she does, eventually standing up next to it. She calls him Izumi, and he reminds her his name is Kurabe. She asks what happened, and he replies that Kyuta has been messing with his memories and replacing them with Izumi's. She says that's odd, as Chihiro said Izumi's memories were lost for good. Jiro wonders what Chihiro has to do with it, since he's talking about Kyuta, and Ryoko doesn't know who that is. Jiro explains, but Ryoko doesn't know anything about it. He asks if he's going to disappear, and she replies that if Izumi's memories were transplanted into him, does that mean he knows about his past? He says he saw it in the form of dreams and movies. She asks what happened in them, and he first describes a shootout dream where he and Iori bombed a factory, which was news to her. Then he relayed the dream where he killed students, where he saw people he knew like Iori and Megami. Ryoko is surprised, as she didn't think Izumi would be capable of doing that. He then mentions that he gets the memories in the form of videotape, and Iori has told him they are real events from the future. Jiro starts to recall the visitor from another world tape and says they were all in a big UFO before it fades to black. We go to event 10. We fade inside the UFO and see a teenage hero standing off to the side. The top of the teleporter lowers and the space under it glows blue, and Teen Jiro Izumi materializes. He expresses relief that he made it back and walks back towards Chihiro. Chihiro asks him how it went. We see Okino standing off to the side, and Jiro says not good, as he arrived right in the middle of the invasion. He barely made it back in one piece, so he doesn't think the world had much of a chance. It appeared to be 1985, and he brought back a flyer from a movie theater that shut down in the Heisei era, but was there in Tsutsuji Ward. Chihiro rationalizes that Sector 4 is in 1985, so that means Sector 3 is in 2025, so we know there's a 40-year gap. Jiro says the machine only lets him travel to specific time periods that are all under attack by invaders. Chihiro asks why they're showing up in the past, and Jiro doesn't know. They ask Okino what he thinks, and he replies that they have no record of an invasion happening back then, so this is inconsistent with history as they know it. Jiro says that they were invaded in 2104, and that was the first and only time, and if there were a kaiju attack, they'd have known about it. Okino rationalizes there must be a time paradox going on. Jiro wonders if something like reality splitting into parallel universes happened when the kaiju arrive, as the kaiju technology allows for time travel, so that would impact the future. Okino says it may be premature to assume the device they've been using to time travel actually does allow travel through time. At that point, an earthquake hits, so Chihiro and Okino run over to the other computer stations, where Okino declares, "Yep, it's bad." Jiro asks what exactly is bad, and Okino brings up the countdown display, which now reads 0. Jiro asks what the shaking means, and Okino replies that it's time. Chihiro calls the two over, puts up a display that shows the entire sectors of the UFO disappearing from contact. Okino says the Earth's crust is crumbling, making this an unprecedented disaster. Chihiro says that several areas are below sea level, and Jiro says they'll be going down soon too. Okino rationalizes that this is what the countdown was for, and it may not be possible to survive. Okino says that the only choice is to seek refuge in the past before running to the transmitter controls and telling the other two to get in the device. They agree, and Jiro suggests that if he's setting coordinates, that Sumire Bridge is a good option, as it was still standing amidst the destruction. Chihiro gets on the transmitter, but there's a problem as Okino says he can't select any sectors, and his commands are not working. He struggles to find a time it will let them travel to, and finds Sector 0 available as Jiro gets on the transmitter. Okino doesn't know what year it is, but it's the only accessible destination. Jiro calls for Okino to get to the transmitter, but he can't because it's not letting him set a time, so he'll need to operate it manually. Jiro shouts Okino's name as the transmitter activates, and we fade to white and end the video here. Let's see. We got 2 more cards to create. First, a movie poster gathered by Jiro, so he could kind of prove that, yeah, they were kind of in a different time period. Kind of. And yep, sounded like the end of the world was going on. So now let's see. I just need to get in close here. And we need to go ahead and label Sector 4 as the 1980s. Next, I don't remember putting the next one there. Sector 5 is the 1940s. Sector 3 is the 2020s. Sector 2 up here. Sector 2 now, we know that's the 2060s. Which means that Sector 1 over here somewhere, there it is. 2100s. There we go. Okay, so now let's see, Juro Izumi. I put that one. Was that 180? Yeah, 189. Transferred all the way to Sector 0. Can I freaking... There we go. Let's see. Teen Chihiro over here. Also went to Sector 0. And let's see. This countdown timer over here that we haven't been able to actually connect anything. We finally figured out that when it hits 0, you have the end of the world. Let's see this movie poster here. Let's see, I just picked you out a second ago. There you are. Movie poster came from Sector 4. And then just so I can find it. Yep, Tsukasa Okino. Here. Transmitted the two of them to Sector 0 while staying behind. Now, one last video. Time for video 79. We start in event 11, where we didn't actually finish out the last chapter, of course. This happens many times. But we continue off from where we left off. We continue on from where we left off with Juro and Chihiro warping to the Sumire Bridge in 2089. Juro tells Chihiro he saw signs back in town that show they're still in 2089. Chihiro points out that the Sentry Tower, the Sentry Tower hadn't been built yet, or that area hadn't even been redeveloped, so the tower is built in 2100. Juro says they need to go as Okino isn't coming back, so there's no point in waiting. Chihiro points out The Shikishima State Building isn't even built yet, and Jiro snaps at her, asking if she plans to stand there forever. Chihiro snaps back that they just can't leave him and asks him if he agrees. Jiro points out that right now they are actually still newborns in this world, so their own mothers aren't even going to recognize them, and their citizen IDs won't be valid. They won't even be able to access public services or purchase anything, so while the city looks familiar, this is 16 years ago, so to them it might as well be a foreign country. But they can't go back, so they will have to figure something out. She asks what they're going to do, and he says the invasion will probably happen again in 15 years, so they need to find a way to warn everybody. She asks if anyone will actually believe them. Jiro replies that the only thing they can do is try, and if nobody believes them, they'll take matters into their own hands. No one else seems to know what's coming, so it has to be those two. Jiro suggests to find their way back to the UFO, as it should still be buried underground. If they can find it, and Chihiro interrupts him at that point, saying she gets it, and they can save Okino by traveling through time again. Jiro says that he can't say it's impossible, but if they're going to do it, they need to make it through today, and recommends they find some food and a place to sleep. She agrees, and they start their new adventure in a fade to black. We fade back into the nurse's office for Event 240, where Jiro finishes telling Ryoko pretty much this whole story, how the two, that Jiro and Chihiro spent the next few years together living in the shadows. This makes Ryoko jump back from Jiro, and he recalls the name Tsukasa Okino, and that they've met somewhere before. Ryoko tells him to stay away, as the incident he just described isn't one of his lost memories. If it revolved rewinding time 16 years ago with Chihiro, it must have been him. Jiro asks who, and she replies that it's a time traveler who's gone back in time over and over again. Jiro calls it crazy to consider time travel, but she says the memories he's been seeing are his. Jiro asks if she means Jiro Izumi from the future, but she replies that it's a different Jiro Izumi from a lost world. He takes a step towards her, prompting her to jump back and yell at him to stay back, and say that she was told he's incredibly dangerous. Jiro asks if that means his dreams are memories of a lost world, and if Kyoto is that world's Jiro Izumi. She says that all that's left is his consciousness, as he transferred himself to an android and fled. Jiro tries to clarify what she means by consciousness, but her headaches flare up again. Kyuda walks in, looks at Ryoko, saying she doesn't look too good, and then tells Jiro he has a big mouth. Jiro tells him to stop this, and he replies that Ryoko is a freaking weirdo, and if he wants to take her word for it, he'll have to face the consequences. Jiro looks to suffer from a headache, and we fade to white. There we go. That has been the last, what was it, 68? 68 to 79? So we get another 12 videos there? Well, technically 11. But anyway, yeah. That's our last batch of videos. So we will be back in a few weeks with the next massive update like this. So until then, don your tinfoil hats, folks, and take care of yourself. Later.